Hi, and welcome back to the European VC, the go-to podcast for everything European VC. If you love the show, share it with your friends and join our newsletter at eu.vc. Today, we are happy to welcome Borys, founding partner at SMOK Ventures. They help fund top early-stage entrepreneurs with checks from 50,000 euros to 1 million euros based in Central and Eastern Europe, focusing on software and gaming startups. We were very fortunate to record live with Borys during this year's edition of How to Web. If you enjoy our content, do support us by hitting the follow button, giving us a review, and following the European VC on LinkedIn.
Borys, welcome to the European VC podcast. Super cool to have you. We are here in Loco from How to Web. So let's start with that. Why the hell are you here?
It's just a great city, Bucharest. No one thinks that. I do. So it's, it's amazing. We are interested in investing in Romania and in other parts of Central Eastern Europe. And this is one of the coolest conferences in the area. So I have to be here.
The venue is really cool, actually. It's my first time in How to Web. The venue is really awesome. I love it.
Great food, great coffee.
Yeah, that coffee is great. We had a beautiful pizza.
Unexpected for a conference. So kudos to Alex and Bogdan and everyone.
The coffee is good, but it's such a hassle, some of them, because it's a fucking machine that we have to make work. I hate it. I'm not a tech guy. I can't make a fucking coffee machine work. So.
Borys, to our listeners that don't know about you, give us the quick rundown. Who's Borys and what is this thing called SMOK?
Sure.
And why the hell SMOK? Because that's a weird name.
It's a weird name, sure. In Albanian, I think it means a small kiss.
A small kiss.
Yes, and in Romanian, they told
Sexy.
me it means a bowl of hair.
Less
That's
sexy.
perfect. A small kiss and ball of hair.
Yes, it's weird. In Poland, unfortunately, it just means a dragon.
Dragon's
Also,
cool, dragon's
also in
cool.
Belarusian, it means a dragon. And actually, I thought it means a dragon in every Central Eastern European country. That's why we called it. And then it turns out it's drakon. In most of the countries, it's just SMOK in Polish. And Dragon is a company that returns a fund.
Yeah.
So that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
So that's why you call it
But now
SMOK.
you're a mix of a small kiss and a hairball.
Yeah, in Albanian and in Romanian. The first part of the question, so who the hell am I? I'm an engineer who turned into entrepreneur, who turned into investor. So I've been changing my career a few times.
You've been shifting to the dark side every single time.
Yeah, it's like more and more to the dark side.
Darker and
then I
darker.
become a private equity, then an investment banker. That's how it works. and SMOK is an American fund investing in Central Eastern Europe. So that's a bit of a different type of fund that most of the funds operating in the area.
Tell us why when you say it's American fund investing in Central Eastern Europe. Why American? What?
It was basically an idea of Paul Bregiel, my partner, who's a kind of venture builder for funds. He has a family office investing in the US, but then he's got funds in all the most cool, sexy, emerging markets in the world. He was one of the first to invest in Singapore 10 years ago. Now he's got one of the biggest funds in the area. He's in Brazil, Africa, and now Eastern Europe. So everywhere we're supposed to be in order to get the snappiest, most undervalued, but still amazing founders.
Did you know him beforehand? Because I know Paul a little bit, had a couple of interactions with him, but nothing serious.
We've been in and out. So Paul, we've met, I think in Warsaw back in 2012 or so, when he was coming to the city. His ancestors are Polish, wanted to do something for the country. So I kind of got him to know all the local ecosystem, the local founders. And he'd been super helpful. He'd been doing a lot of intros. And he actually introed me, when I was running my company, Filmmaster, he introed me to Ashwin Naveen, who's the founder of BitTorrent. And then he created Samba TV, who later acquired my company. So that was Paul's intro. And after that, I was like, oh, this Paul guy, he knows things and he knows people. Let's do something together. And once I got the vesting, and Paul was like, yeah, let's do something together in Poland and Eastern Europe. And that's how it kind of started.
Paul is also a good friend of Adeo Resi from...
Yeah, he's very much in the Founder Institute. Yeah, I'm also pretty active, both Poland and Eastern Europe.
I was about to ask if how are you involved, if at all, with Founder Institute?
I've been one of the first mentors in the Warsaw edition back in 2011 when it started, and I'm mentoring in the Eastern European ones in Bucharest and Sofia as well. So I really love this, the idea of Founder Institute to get the first-time founders to get their first knowledge so they know what the hell they're talking about when they talk to VCs and stuff like that. So yeah.
Okay,
but then let's get into SMOK. Not okay. That was the American part. So that's where I guess you're Delaware Incorporated or something like that, and then.
We actually in the Netherlands, so it's more like It's
more that your LP basis, I guess, is very heavily American because
Paul and his brother are partners to the fund, and then we have myself and Diana based here in Warsaw. Then we have a few people in Romania and in Ukraine. The whole conglomerate of different funds, originates from Paul, and the whole way we act. We act more like a Silicon Valley fund versus a Central Eastern or even a European fund. I think that's the culture.
And that's the next thing. How do you act? What's your investment thesis? The strategy?
Yeah, we act fast. I think that's we really commit very fast to companies. We do pre-seed deals. We want to not waste founders' time, so we do very quick comments, very quick no's as well. So people are sometimes scared when they have a meeting with me. I'm like, I'm gonna think about that, and then like half an hour later, I'm like, no, and they're like surprised, but then they appreciate it usually because they're like, it's better to see quick no.
Second best answer, right?
Yeah, like it's the worst when you're like, it's like been a few weeks. Are you in or out? I hated it. I was fundraising for my startups for ages, and I just I have a list of investors where I just make your mind.
Tell me something.
So being fast is important.
Yeah, for sure.
We are, hands off. We don't really interact that much once we invest. We want the founders to call us if they need help, and they do. We're both operators, so that helps. I feel sometimes I'm, valuable to those founders, especially when they go into tough times. They're like, what the fuck do we do? Do we have to fire people? Or there's a problem with fundraising. So all that stuff I've been going through and Paul's been going through. Yeah. So it's just easier for us to help. And then I think the biggest value we actually add is once you're actually going to the fundraise. And usually we invest in Central Eastern Europe. So those guys really, and girls, they know the local ecosystem, they know the local founders, say they're in Romania, they know all the local funds, same as in Poland, other countries. They're not really well connected outside of Poland. And we are super well connected both in the US, in Asia, and in Western Europe. And this is where most of the money actually comes from after we invest. More than 80% of the money that our startups raise come from those countries. So this is the biggest benefit, I think. And we've been really, helpful in those intros. We're not gonna, sell a startup to a Korean fund or Japanese fund or Singaporean fund, but at least they know the guys who invested. They know Paul. They know, we did together, due diligence of the company. It's just way easier for them to commit. They like the company, they like the startup, but they also have the validation of us being in the cap table. That's a small thing, but I think it's pretty helpful and it's pretty unique in the CEE area.
And when you say that you move fast, that it often comes with also a bit of a more bigger portfolio. How many tickets are you doing? How big is the fund? Give us all those stats.
So the first fund was about 10 million, and we spent it about 2 years. So we made 25 investments, and then we also had 10 small acceleration tickets. Yeah. So about one investment per month over 2 years. And now the second fund, we're aiming at 50 mil. But the strategy is similar. We're going to do a bit between 25 and 35 investments, but we want to follow on a bit longer. We want to support those companies up until Series B, ideally, to have a bit bigger stake and a bit longer be able to help those companies. Especially now, in the current times, it's actually important.
So just to be clear, so you are still in the process of raising Fund 2, correct?
I would say, we're past the first closing, and the second closing, we're just waiting for the two big institutions. Yeah. So we're not really fundraising for private money anymore for the second fund. We can still sneak in a few tickets, but we're not really actively fundraising.
So if you're an LP listening in, just kidding, but
obviously, we're always the next fund's gonna be 2 years. It's gonna be we're kind of constantly fundraising anyway.
But you, so 30, 35 investments, Central Eastern Europe. How vertical? Are you agnostic?
We are agnostic. We do software. We wouldn't do genetics or we wouldn't do biotech tech. We don't know much. Like we're all engineers. Like,
Yeah.
all of us, like the 4 co-founders, we're all engineers. It's also pretty unique. As engineers, I like very engineering-centric startups. We've done a lot of developer tools. We've done a lot of game like software for gamers. But we've also done basically just guys who understand one industry, like with the hospitality startup. The guy who've been like doing hospitality startups for the whole time, for the whole year, for the whole life, and also like prop tech, fintech. So we would say really good entrepreneurs, a lot of serial entrepreneurs who want to do something global now. That's the most important part. Like we won't be interested at all if you are even a big local play. The whole idea of our fund is that we want to help you raise in Asia, in the US. And to do this, you need to be tackling those markets.
So now that we know what SMOK's about, we know what you guys are about, and you talked of the journey of going from Fund 1 to Fund 2, what's changed, what hasn't changed. I'd really love for you to dive a bit deeper if you could, because often, Andreas and I have these conversations, with aspiring GPs and emerging GPs, talking about fund size. And I always say, like, I love bottom-up approaches, where it's more about what are you investing in? What are the deals you're doing? Why? And then that you derive fund size from that. But your second fund is 5 times the size of the first fund. So I'd love to deep dive on, was that, Boris woke up and felt like a 50 million euro sized fund, or what was the reasoning behind it?
It was funny, like Paul, my partner, told me that the first fund is going to be 10 mil, the second fund is going to be 50 mil, the third fund is going to be 100 mil. And I was like, 2 years ago when I was like really struggling raising 10 mil, and I got most of the money from the government, only like 70% of the money came from the government. I was like, how the hell do I raise 50 mil?
The Polish government.
Yeah. But then it turns out the second fund is way easier. Like when you already have a good investment, and we became one of the top funds in the region. In Poland, everyone knew us. We did all the hot deals that were on the market. Then it was just like some people, just put 10 times more. I didn't even know that those guys, can do it. So after like a year of investing, we already knew that we raised too little in the first fund. The reason was we do super early pre-seed deals, and we couldn't invest more than like $1 million into a company. And then like very quickly, like we invested say $500,000 into a company at 5 mil valuation, and then suddenly they raised 20 mil. We cannot even put pro rata, and we cannot even our share is dramatically going down, and we would love to be part of our top performers. So now with a bigger fund, we just want to support them a bit longer.
How did you manage that in Fund 1? Because that's a situation that many GPs have had. It's probably going to be a bit less aggressive now compared to the 2-year period we're coming out of. But how did you manage that, seeing you had money on the table? What did you do with it? Because I keep hearing about a guy coming out of TechCrunch in the States that is raising a fund to buy up GP stakes in...
We've been approached by a number of those funds. Yeah. Those are actually they're on the rise.
Yeah,
and a lot of LPs a lot of GPs will want to do that. So we didn't do much really. Like we couldn't, with the setup we had, we couldn't really increase the fund size because of all the governmental structure. So we decided, hey, our returns are going to be great. Because the upside, the multiples are going to be amazing if we just do the seed round. Yeah. It's just that we feel that we could do better returns as in actual cash if we invest, in a few top performers. So that's why we changed this. Not a huge change of strategy. Same strategy for the pre-seed and seed investment. It's just a bit more follow-on.
My question was then, why not raise an opportunity fund as an example? Was that ever on the table?
Yeah, we can still do that for some of for both Fund 1 and Fund 2.
Exactly, yeah.
It was just one project at a time, and we finished spending Fund 1. We started, fundraising Fund 2. Now we have it. So I'm still considering to do that. Even per startup, we can still do those things, and there is a lot of interest from both LPs to put into some of the top companies. For now, it's been LPs putting some of the top companies instead of us, so that's great for them, not great for us. But I think we're gonna fix it.
You're not doing like SPVs?
No, not yet. The
LPs are going direct.
It's kind of harder when you have like institutional investors, because then it's like you have to. Everyone needs to make sure there is no conflict of interest, and it's always some kind of conflict of interest. Yeah. So we just, we didn't have the mind space to do that for Fund 1, but we will consider that.
Are the LPs, they're seizing the pro rata themselves?
No, it's more like, especially now, there's a lot of bridge rounds coming, and obviously, our LPs most of them are entrepreneurs, and they follow our company, so it's just easier for them to put a bit of money into the companies versus going to the open market. So a lot of those deals were just, I just spread it, hey, those guys are great, and we putting a bit, and then they put a bit more. And sometimes they put
It's
even
more
like
of an informal facilitation.
it's more informal. It's not formalized. I wouldn't like to formalize it because it's restricting startups. Like I don't want them to have to give space to my LPs. They don't know them. They have
There
to.
you go. Yeah.
It's a relationship thing.
I'm curious because, and we'll cut this part of the interview if you don't want to talk about it.
No, we won't.
The Polish government's fund of fund program has been discussed in the ecosystem as one of those that hasn't been the most always successful.
Even on the pod, we've had guests saying that they didn't want that capital, as an example.
How has your experience been, and what are the learnings to all the people that are raising, especially because what we typically hear is that the sovereign fund of funds typically go on the same development paths from each country to each country. And in Denmark, we started making mistakes, then we learned. Now we've got Vex Fund, which is doing a pretty good job. You know, all of them are kind of, now we're seeing Eastern Europe going through the same things that we've been through in Western Europe on the sovereign wealth fund front.
We've been making our own mistakes as well because the government spending on startups in Poland started back in 2008 or so.
Yeah.
And that was mostly grants given by the government straight to startups. That was a horrible mistake. And not many startups actually took the money. Interestingly, I took the money and we actually did get to an exit. That was one of the successes of that program. But then they decided, hey, let's do it as a VC funding, but they also screwed it up. And they did like a whole bunch of like 2 or 3 batches of VC funding. So we took the money from the last batch, which was definitely the best. In general, I would say the last batch is a success because it got a lot of entrepreneurs like myself to launch their first funds. So the government was like PFR, the organization, was actually pretty open-minded with, you know, giving the opportunity to people not normally associated with venture. Because before it was mostly financial guys doing, you know, venture in Poland. Now it's more entrepreneurs. So a number of those funds, like my fund, you know, we kind of got that funding, and then we raised the second fund, which is private. We can still take some institution, but now it's like more on our terms. We don't have to. So it was a success this way, and also it was a success because it generated many more, you know, startups from in Poland. I can compare it with like Bulgaria or with Czech Republic or with Romania. They didn't have those programs, and there's still like 5 actual funds operating. In Poland, there's like 50 funds or even more funds operating. Okay, not all of them are great, but you have different options. So I would say this was an interesting experiment. It was based on the Israeli experiment, actually. In general, I think it's a success for the Polish funding ecosystem. Now it's a time to checking.
Of course.
And I hope they don't fund again the same founders, the same GPs. Like they need to prove themselves now in an open market. They should be, so depending on where it goes. But I think now they're changing a bit. Even the fund I got was a bit restrictive. We could only invest in Poland. It has to be associated with Poland. That's why the foreign funds didn't want to do it, because they didn't want to restrict themselves to Poland. But for me, it was great. It was like a way for me to get to the first fund. We still wanted to do mostly Poland. So it was a great test, and it's just way easier to raise 3 mil versus 10 mil. But they now are doing a bit different strategy. So they fund bigger funds. They're a small part of bigger funds, and only that part needs to be invested in Poland. So let's say 5%. So for some of those big funds from the UK, that's okay. Like they would still do that, and it's a way for Polish government to be part of those, more successful, bigger European funds. So yeah, I think they're evolving. It's an interesting strategy. It's better to do this than to do nothing, I think, which happened in most other countries.
We have to touch on a topic we talked about last night as well. I said to you on the back of a LinkedIn post that you did that ended up getting quite some traction, because you said that founders with a Russian-sounding name, put on your first page of your pitch deck, put your story there, explain how your relation is, just to get it out of the way so that you don't have that lingering throughout a process that can either be, better or shorter. We had the funny conversation where you said, well, people took it more to heart, and some people took it in a way that it was never meant. And then I said, do you think that the VC ecosystem should be more vocal about what's going on with Russia and Ukraine and everything? And then we had an interesting conversation. I want to bring this up because I think that you're vocal about this, and I'd love to just, don't comment necessarily on anything that I said, but say whatever you want in this context.
I think it's something a lot of GPs think about. No one really had the guts to say it and to at least start a conversation. And I think some people just took it too personal because they were like, I wrote something like, if you're a Russian and support Putin, fuck off. I stand by that. But I'm just saying, to all Russians, fuck off. Obviously, I have Russian friends. I actually wanted to live in Russia when I was younger. My wife was like, what the hell? But I was like, I was a big fan of Dostoevsky. I wanted to live in St. Petersburg because I was like, I go to those, beer pubs and get drunk. I was like, I'm really a big fan of that. It's breaking me that now, like, it's just not possible anymore, and, the country is going nowhere. And we have a hard time because, like, it's about reputation. It's about due diligence. I would love to just not take nationality into account at all. That's how it's supposed to be. Yeah. I don't think that's possible in the current times. Hopefully that soon is possible again, but for now it seems like it's black or white. You either support Putin, or you support the country, or you're against it, and you have to kind of take the full path. So I'm like, I would still consider, talking to guys who are based outside of Russia and, are anti-Putin, and they've proven that they are. But I will be just way, way more. I'll be asking a lot of more questions. It's just going to be a bit harder for you guys. I feel sorry for that, but I feel way more sorry for the Ukrainians and what's happening right now.
Yeah. Boris, we always end the episodes with a quick fire round.
Yeah, I know.
It's time for that. The quick fire round is when we ask you 3 quick answer questions, 30 to 60 seconds each. Are you ready?
I'm nervous, but I'm ready, I guess.
You should not be nervous. First question, what areas, sectors, or technologies excite you the most that most people around you don't really care that much about?
I'm supposed to be quick, right? I'm pretty excited about the game streaming.
Yeah, okay.
The game streaming industry. It's a growing industry, but a lot of VCs have no clue about that because they don't play games, they don't watch Twitch.
You're saying they're too old.
I didn't say that. No, that would be ageism. So even though it's a small market right now, I feel this is something that's going to be just huge. And it's going to be, all the kids are influenced by those guys. And so I think, getting onto this market, and we have a few investments, I think it's pretty big.
Yeah, I agree. It's very interesting, yeah. See how it develops. Second question of the quick fire. What are your top tips for emerging managers across Europe who are fundraising?
Build your network way before you fundraise. Be very vocal, meet a lot of people, create events, be the guy who everyone knows that, this guy should have deal flow, this girl should have deal flow in this area, in this space. Be the expert, at least in one niche. This way you're going to get a lot of people trust you that you are the one to, the only thing you need to have is the deal flow and the money. That's the only thing you have to raise a fund.
We had a great talk about that yesterday about Bogdan. We're sitting there at Venture and CE Summit, and he's sitting there with 100 investors that he has been inviting for 10 years to come to How to Web, and now he's building Underline, and it's apparent that of course that fund is going to both raise itself and it's also going to perform greatly because he has all the backing in the world for what he's building. That's the difference between being someone who should have a fund and someone who just wants to have a fund, right?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. I love that.
When you ask all the founders, they're like, that's the first question I ask you in Romania, who should we be talking to? As for which funds are great and which funds and everyone's like, talk to Bogdan, he's doing something amazing. I'm like, yep, of course, that makes sense.
Third and final question of the quickfire, which is typically the hardest, which is what's the most counterintuitive learning you've had since you've started SMOK?
Sometimes don't go with your gut feeling. I was so much into this is a cultural thing. You're supposed to really be a great teammate with your founders and to really hang out with them, and that's really important. It is. But I made the mistakes of sometimes investing because of that. I focused too much on the person and too little on the product, on their ability to execute. So now I'm I still think you have to be friends, especially in early stage. Otherwise, it's just not going to work. But I have to be filtering a bit more. I made some, I probably would have invested in a few companies I did, and everyone has that. Those ideas, those. I'm not gonna say which.
Never. Please list them now.
Yeah, I can type them.
Every single one.
So yeah.
Boris, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, pleasure.
We love doing stuff with you, so I think we're almost on our way to head to dinner with a bunch of cool people for EUVC Syndicate
I'm
dinner.
joining too, so.
It's going to be in a place that's going to feel like the Great Gatsby has come alive, so it's going to be amazing. Can't wait for it. Looking forward. See you, Boris. Thanks a million.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the European VC, the go-to podcast for everything European VC. If you love the show, share it with your friends and join our newsletter at EU.VC.